Welcome back, everyone, to The Quest for the Cures Continues. I hope that you enjoyed last night's episode, and I hope that you came away empowered with information and also convinced that not everything that we hear is true. I hope that you understand now that we have been potentially lied to about certain things, and certain treatments and certain information has potentially been withheld from you. One of the things that's pretty much without dispute is that the immune system plays a big role in the prevention of disease. As a matter of fact, the immune system is really your first line of defense against pathogens, against the bad guys that come in and try to invade your body and make you sick. Have you ever wondered why, let's say you've got some kiddos and they're in school, and somebody comes to school in their class and they're sick with the flu, and the next day maybe half the class is out with the flu, but the other half is at school and they never get sick? What was the difference? What was the difference between those children? Were they exposed to different flu bugs? No, they're exposed to the same flu bug, but the kids that didn't get sick had an immune system that was functioning the way it should have been, and those that got sick, for some reason that immune system was compromised. Tonight's going to be a powerful episode. You are going to understand the immune system better than 99% of the people out there after you listen to this information. We're going to teach you what the immune system is, what it does, and what substances might compromise that immune system and make you sick. I hope you enjoy the information. I hope you learn from the information that we're going to share with you tonight. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy the show. Our first guest tonight is Dr. Rashid Buttar. He's a friend of mine, and he practices medicine in North Carolina. He's got some valuable insight into the immune system, but I think this first quote from Dr. Buttar is going to blow your socks off.
So cancer, first and foremost, is a problem with the immune system. You cannot have cancer if you have an intact immune system. Okay. If you have cancer, you don't have an intact immune system. If people say, oh no, my immune system's fine, then you can't have cancer. You can't have two. Okay, those two things can't live together. If it's an immune system that's compromised, you can have cancer. If you have a cancer, you have to, by definition, have a compromised immune system.
I was privileged to speak at the Cancer Control Society convention in August 2014 in Los Angeles, and while I was there, I was able to interview 3 medical doctors about this same issue, the immune system. Let's have a listen.
But the first thing I do when I get a new patient is, one of the things that I do is I begin to unimpede their immune system, because every cancer patient, their immune system has missed the cancer. So it has missed it. And so you have to unimpede their immune system, and then you have to stimulate it back into action, because at the end of the day, they will not survive if their immune system is not really stimulated. One of the many fallacies of standard cancer care is they just want to kill cancer cells. Well, that's nice, but why did you get cancer?
Yeah, what was the cause?
They never ask that question. I tell my patients, I encourage them to continue to see their oncologist to give them feedback, so that as they get well, they will have a witness born to them that other things work, whereas they know good and well that what they're doing is not working. But I say 2 things that you'll be amazed at. They'll never ask what caused this and deal with that or try to deal with it in any way. It's just, let's kill cancer cells. And then number 2, as you get well, they will never ask you, what did you do? Because they don't want that knowledge, because then they're responsible. So that's 2 things that the doctors will never ask the patient who is getting well from taking herbals or nutritionals or alternative medical treatment. But you have to unimpede the immune system, and then you have to stimulate it back in action, because at the end of the day, without your immune system working, you will not live.
With all our patients, whether it's cancer or any kind of chronic disease, it's always about lowering inflammation and improving and increasing immune system response. Because your immune system has to fight, fix, and repair against anything, right? So it's not just suppression, it's about strengthening. But the nice thing about the natural therapies is it turns on and off genes accordingly. So it's not just turning off genes always. It's also up-regulation and down-regulation. So curcumin, I mentioned, I showed you that slide today, and it shows certain genes are now turned on that our body already has this natural mechanism of fighting cancer, for example. And we want to keep stimulating that. What happens is as we get older, through other things of environment, lifestyle, stress, diet, those genes and those transcription factors and those proteins turn off. So we all are born with it. We just want to keep stimulating it, right? And the nice thing is that these natural therapies can, turn on the things that we want to turn on and turn off the things we want to turn off.
The immune system and inflammation, how are they related to cancer?
Well, it'd be logical to argue that in an intact immune system, there would be no room for cancer. And the immune system, which is kind of an indefinable entity, it's not like it's right over here or it's right over here. I mean, the immune system, it wraps around the GI tract. It's a nebulous, almost a vaporous, process. So it's hard to say in anatomy and physiology and dissection, here's the immune system. Having said that, if it's functioning well, its job is to enhance health and promote detoxification and so forth. And inflammation is one of the main instruments that the immune system uses to regulate health. So one of the things we find in cancer, which is quite interesting, is that typically the guy that says, I haven't been sick a day in my life, I'm thinking, we have to worry about cancer here. Whereas the kid that gets a lot of fevers and has an immune system which is always up and running and not apathetic, that's a good sign. So if you want to get a good prognosis for health, it's someone who's been able to have a challenge, upregulate the immune system, have a big fever, burn through it, and come out better.
Very similar to something that Dr. Rashid Buttar told me. He said the people that I worry about are the people that have never gotten sick.
Yeah.
Because of the same exact reason.
Yeah. These are principles that go back. I mean, I'd like to say I invented them all, but they were long before any of us were alive. This is what people's grandmothers know, which is why in the old days when kids had the mumps, you'd go have mumps parties.
Yeah, the mumps parties.
Your kids are bringing
Chickenpox parties.
Yeah.
I was able to interview Dr. David Brownstein in Detroit, Michigan about this topic. Let's hear what he has to say.
I assume you drove a car out to my house today to do this interview.
Well, our horses broke down, so yeah, yes we did.
So I also assume that when you take that car back to the airport, you're going to put gas in that car. The car needs a certain kind of gas to run optimally. And just if, let's say a gas station, maybe your own personal car would be a better analogy for this, but if there was a gas station that said 10 cents a gallon gas, and you pull up there and you say, hey, I'm going to do a deal here. It's going to cost me less to fill up my car. And then you look at it and it's mud. Are you going to put that mud in your gas tank? No, because you know it's going to wreck your car. Well, I say the same thing. We need to put the right fuel in our bodies so our immune system functions optimally. We have a great design in the human body to fight infection, to stay healthy into old age, to keep brain function into old age. And if we treat the body right, the immune system can work just fine. And treating that body right is doing the basics like what we're talking about, supplying it with the right nutrients, maintaining hydration, keeping iodine levels up, and maintaining adequate amounts of salt intake. And the immune system can do its job, surveil for foreign substances and foreign bodies and get rid of that, and it can keep cancer at bay. It's when the immune system gets disrupted, I think that's when bad things start happening to us.
Okay, so we're starting to get the full picture here. We just heard from 5 medical doctors that all talked about the fact that cancer is a result of a compromised immune system. When I visited Las Vegas, I interviewed Dr. Keith Scott Mumby, who had some valuable information to share about the immune system. Talk about white blood cells, the immune system, and inflammation as it all relates to cancer.
Okay, well, part of the question, Ty, is what is the basic model for cancer? There's the stem cell model and the metabolic model and so on. But certainly at the core, if not the cause, many people, and I'm one of them, see cancer as basically a disease of the immune system. Especially in our modern world, I don't think there's any way you're going to stop cells firing off and going wrong and turning into rogue cells. There's just too many toxins. But a good immune system will pick them up very quickly and eliminate them. So in a very strong sense, cancer is a disease of the immune system. So you want to do everything in your power to help the immune system. That means, the right kind of nutrients that will help it. It also means removing the stresses that will stop it working. And they're all inflammatory in nature. I mentioned food and, inflammatory foods, but there's chemicals, pesticides, pollutants, bisphenol, all of these things, loads of those too. And then don't forget heavy metal toxicity. Mercury and lead and these things not only have their poisonous powers, but they're highly inflammatory too. So it's very important to unburden the immune system. And I've got to say, but emotions can be pretty inflammatory too. The immune system gets burdened, even if a person is upset, sad, depressed, or whatever. And I would like a minute to talk about that with cancer. I think it's a very crucial element in cancer. But really, that's what I'm saying, is anything that's inflammatory is bad for cancer. And yet we can get a good handle on it. There are ways, like you can take your antioxidants, your phytonutrients, omega-3 is brilliant anti-inflammatory. But removing the triggers, like the inflammatory foods and heavy metals, is a better strategy anyway. So that's something we should all do. And it's back to my saying, any good health measure is an anti-cancer measure.
I love that quote. Any good health measure is an anti-cancer measure. And if you have a fully functioning immune system, you cannot have cancer. Now, what's one of the main things that compromises the immune system other than the conventional treatments, chemo and radiation, which, yes, they do compromise the immune system. They devastate the immune system. But what's one other thing, a common thing that people eat on an everyday basis? Sugar. Let's listen to nutritionist Casey Krejci discuss this very important subject.
So sugar, we talked about it's a big problem. Yes, it's a big problem. I mean, sugar is wonderful. Everybody likes sugar. I like sugar, but I choose not to thrive on sugar. See, sugar should have been in our fun foods, building blocks, fuel, and fun. Okay? Fun foods. Every now and then you have sugar. But sugar, 100 grams of carbohydrates. I saw a study that was either 100 grams or 200 grams recently where it said that, like, you had a pizza meal, for instance, or a pasta meal. Within 15 minutes of eating that meal, your leukocytic index, which is essentially a white blood cell, how many bad guys can it eat in an hour? The study was suggesting it should be about 16 per white blood cell in an hour. But within eating this carbohydrate meal, within 15 minutes, you've dropped from 16 to 1.9 and hold that for hours.
So you have 10% capacity that you used to.
10% capacity, and basically these patients are often in an immune compromised state to start with. Some of the treatments they are getting are taking their immunity down to almost nothing, and then they're throwing sugar in on top of that, which directly feeds the problem, but it also directly takes a whack at the immunity. It's a terrible cycle that people need to consider. 1 century ago, sugar was a delicacy, so you'd have maybe mom would make an apple pie, or you go to the store and get a little treat or something like that. 5 pounds a year, it's estimated, would be the intake of sugar per year per person on the average. Today, it's a whopping 150 plus pounds per person per year on the average, and somebody is eating our sugar. So the average is pretty high. The point is, people are eating their weight in sugar a year.
150 pounds of sugar per person per year? Wow, that's incredible. Let's listen to a few more physicians talk about the way that sugar compromises the immune system and also actually fuels cancer cells. Talk about briefly the connection between sugar and cancer cells.
There's certain common characteristics that all cancer cells have. One of those characteristics is that cancer is an obligate glucose metabolizer, meaning that it has an obligation to metabolize glucose. It only survives on sugar. Other types of components that would be commonalities in all cancer. Cancer is a highly anaerobic scenario. Cancer likes an anaerobic scenario. Cancer does not like oxygen. Oxygen works as a drug against cancer. Another component would be cancer is an acidic process. So in an alkaline environment, cancer does not do well. So there's many common characteristics that cancer has. One of those is that it is an obligate glucose metabolizer. So if you can reduce the amount of simple sugars, you are effectively going to be reducing the food supply to the cancer. Patrick Quillen, who wrote Beating Cancer with Nutrition, a very good friend of mine, in his book says that 42 to 46% of cancer patients die of cachexia, of malnutrition. How many oncologists are addressing malnutrition? No one. In fact, what do? They give people Ensure, which is sugar, and you know that cancer is an obligate glucose metabolizer. It needs sugar to survive. In fact, one of the techniques is to reduce the amount of sugar so that it can't feed the cancer. But they're actually giving gasoline to the fire and then expecting to put out the fire. You can't put out a fire with gasoline.
I wanted to get the opinion of Dr. Patrick Quillen, a nutritional expert who wrote a book called Beating Cancer with Nutrition about the effects of sugar on cancer cells and their insidious relationship.
Sugar is, cancer is a sugar feeder. Cancer is what's called an obligate glucose metabolizer, meaning that there is a dramatic uptake of glucose in the cells of tumor cells. If you can lower gut and blood glucose, you can help to slow down cancer.
Normal cells go through what we call oxidative phosphorylation, which means you take oxygen, you take sugar, and you make 32 molecules of this ATP, which is our energy currency, right?
You said oxidative phosphorylation.
Oxidative phosphorylation, right? So we take oxygen, and through this process we add a phosphorus to this ATP, and that's our energy currency, right? That's how we move about. And the more ATP, the better, right? So if you're a cell that is able to undergo oxidative phosphorylation, and again, you're able to do that because a set of genes is turned on, you have to go through what's called the Krebs cycle, then that's a happy state, right? If you have to move to this anaerobic, what we call anaerobic metabolism, for every molecule of glucose, you can't get 32 ATP anymore. You can only get 2 molecules of ATP, right?
Right. And,
so
and anaerobic means?
Anaerobic means you don't have to have oxygen.
Okay.
Right? That means that I can survive without oxygen, right? Which makes me able to survive in a more toxic environment, but it makes my energy level a lot more restricted. So then that's why cancer cells are so ravenous about having to absorb sugar, right? Because they can only make 2 ATP per molecule.
Because cancer cells love sugar. You hear that phrase all the time, and that explains why that phrase came about.
Correct. One of the tests that we use to diagnose cancer is a PET scan. So with a PET scan, we take radiated sugar, right, and we inject it in you. Because cancer cells take up sugar so much more efficiently than normal cells, they will take up that radiated sugar, and then we're able to see on the CAT scan where the sugar is, which that tells us where the cancer is, right? So we're very aware of the dependence on cancer cells for prodigious amounts of sugar, and that's why, again, cancer patients die of starvation, is because the cancer cells will suck up all the sugar from human cells.
Sugar is a fuel for cancer cells. So basically, cancer cells, they have an altered metabolism, an altered physiology, and they're not able to produce energy from aerobic metabolism, and so the mitochondria itself is damaged. And so they depend on anaerobic metabolism, so without oxygen, which is basically breaking down sugar. So they utilize sugar and they produce a lot of waste products, particularly one that we're probably all familiar with, lactic acid. And so they produce a high amount of acids, and they consume a tremendous amount of energy in our system through sugar. And so basically, when we take the sugar out, we're taking out the preferred fuel source for the cancer cells. So they become weakened in that state. As opposed to when we're fueling our body with a lot of sugar, not only does it cause the free radical damage, which is what actually damages the mitochondria to begin with and creates this whole process, but at the same time, we're also providing the preferred fuel source for more cancer cell development in our body. See, what most people don't realize is all of us have cancer cells. We're all developing them every single day. Typically, our immune system would hunt them down and regulate them. However, when we've got immune deficiencies, which is another problem with sugar, it weakens our body's innate immune system. And so when that happens, now these cancer cells will start to grow without being checked, being kept in check by our body's natural immune response. So if we just continue to dump in the sugar, again, we're weakening our immune system, and we're strengthening the cancer cells. We're actually giving them an advantage in our body. So, you can feed one or the other. You can feed your immune system and strengthen that, or you can feed the cancer and strengthen that. And I think if we all had this understanding and this knowledge, and we really knew that, obviously we want to feed our immune system.
While I was at the Cancer Control Society convention in Los Angeles earlier this year, I was able to speak with Bob Wright of the American Anti-Cancer Institute.
Another thing that sugar does, and most people don't know about, is the average amount of sugar in one can of, let's say, Coca-Cola. It's probably 9 or 10 teaspoons of sugar in there. That's enough sugar to effectively shut down a minimum of 50% of your immune system for 4 hours. One 12-ounce Coke. If you're a cancer patient, can you afford that? Since the immune system is the only thing that can heal you, we simply can't afford that. You've got to avoid all the sugar. If you take a Diet Pepsi or Coke, it ranges from 2.5 to 2.7 pH. very acidic. You know, and acid, if you're a cancer patient, is one of your main problems to begin with, acid and inflammation. And we know from Dr. Weeks, we've known this before, that inflammation causes metastases of cancer as well. But it would take you 32 12-ounce glasses of 9.5 pH water to neutralize that one 12-ounce can of Coca-Cola.
Wow.
That's why we're acidic, and that's why we're struggling today.
Let's see what Suzanne Summers, one of America's most beloved personalities, and Burton Goldberg, who was actually highlighted in her best-selling book, Knockout, have to say about this issue.
When I get tempted, because I've got this ice cream shop down the corner that I love ice cream. I love ice cream and I love cake.
Who doesn't?
Who doesn't? I then envision the little bad guys in my GI tract going, come on, you can have some. Come on, give me some. Because all they want is sugar. They need sugar. They thrive on sugar. They have to have sugar. And I say to them, no, I'm going to starve you to death. My job is to stamp you out, so I'm never giving you your Happy Meal. But how on college's office, and I've seen it where you go into their office and they have candy bowls with candy there because cancer patients on chemotherapy are so weak and they need a little pick-me-up. And I have looked at that at different times in oncologist's office going,
what are they thinking?
What are you thinking?
The oncologists use sugar to carry the radiologic molecule into the cancer cell to show up on the X-ray, the PET scan. The oncologist knows that sugar feeds cancer because that's why he uses it as a Trojan horse. And when you finish your chemo in a conventional setting, they give you cookies and ice cream or candy. That is tantamount to putting gasoline on a fire. That means these oncologists are guilty of crimes against humanity. They are killing their patients.
Wow, passionate words from a very passionate man. I think we're all starting to get the picture here about how sugar feeds cancer cells and it compromises our immune system. But that lends the question, what exactly is the immune system? I couldn't think of a better person to answer that question than immunologist A.J. Lanigan.
I mean, I'm old enough to remember Tricky Dick Nixon saying we're going to have a cure for cancer in 10 years. Well, obviously he wasn't a math major. So where is it? Is there in fact even a cure for cancer? Again, I'm not smart enough to tell you that there is, and I don't make no claim that I have one, but I do know this. To overcome cancer, to stop it before it begins, or to reverse it once you've contracted it, I'm pretty much convinced the immune system is going to have to be a major player. Your immune system is really the only thing that stands between you and all those things in you, on you, and around you trying to get you all the time. Cancer included. The largest number of immune cells in your body are known as neutrophils. When you go get your blood work, just standard old blood work, NEU is the abbreviation for neutrophils. On any given day, they'll account for anywhere from 50 to 70% of your total immune army, which basically your white blood cells. Ty, they can't see cancer. Can't see it on your best day. The majority of your immune system cannot see cancer. In fact, the very narrow margin would be made up of natural killer cells, and they're constantly surveilling all the cells in your body. Healthy cell, smiley face. Healthy cell, smiley face. This cell doesn't have a smiley face. Bada bing, bada boom. That's the job of natural killer cells. There may be virus hiding inside that cell. That cell could be mutating. Could be mutating and be benign. Could be mutating and turning cancerous. Doesn't matter. No smiley face. You got some cytotoxic T lymphocytes. I've talked about them being ninja cells.
What does cytotoxic mean?
Cytotoxic means, think of cyto. Cytoplasm, that's the guts of the cell, that's the innards. So if something is cytotoxic, that means that when it hits a cell, it basically blows it up and lets the guts come out. So cells, for example, your NK cells, their job is to keep ramming into that cell that doesn't have a smiley face. And every time it rams into it, it releases chemicals into the lining of that target cell until it finally bursts open, or lyses, L-Y-S-E. It'll lyse that cell wall, and the juice comes out, the cytoplasm. The same thing happens with cytotoxic T lymphocytes.
Question for you then on these, you've got T lymphocytes, you've got neutrophils, you've got NK cells, natural killer cells. Okay, are the neutrophils and the NK cells, are they lymphocytes? Are they leukocytes? What's the difference between
let
people
me try to give you a picture for that.
Okay.
Think of the immune system as having two arms. And let's call one of these arms specific and the other arm is non-specific.
Okay.
Now when I talk in terms of non-specific, I'm talking about neutrophils, macrophages, or macrophages, depending on which side of the Atlantic you're educated, eosinophils, and these cells are basically frontline, and they deal with simply one question: are you self? S-E-L-F. And if the question is not yes, then basically their job is to, kick butt and get rid of whatever it is. Now, on the other side, the specific immune response is going to be things like B cells. Now, B cells are lymphocytes. B cells and all the other cells, by the way, are born from the bone marrow.
Wow, AJ really explained the immune system in such a way that even a child can understand it. But he mentioned the fact that most of the immune system, the majority of the immune system, I think he said, cannot even see cancer cells. What did he mean by that? I was in LA earlier this year speaking at the Cancer Control Society convention, and I sat down with Dr. Tony Jimenez, and he shed some light on this information.
As physicians and as practitioners or advisors or counselors, we always tell patients and people in general, let's enhance your immune system if you have cancer. Because we know that the immune system takes care of a cold to cancer and everything in between. So that's the thought. Let's optimize the immune system, and we've gone a long way in addressing a cancer situation. But let's think about it this way. We know that in 1 cubic centimeter of a tumor, there's approximately 1 billion cancer cells, and that's billion with a B.
Okay.
65% of those cells at any one time are dormant. 35% of those cells are active. So they're in the synthesis phase of the cell cycle, not in the resting phase, okay? Remember mitosis in 101 biology, right? This is what we're talking about. So of all those cells, 99% of the cells are what's called non-cancer stem cells.
Okay.
1% about are cancer stem cells. So when someone has chemo radiation, they are not only suppressing the immune system, but they're making the cancer stem cells more active and more aggressive.
And that's the boogers you got to worry about.
Those are the boogers you have to worry about. Why? Because they survive in the bloodstream. They're immortal if you don't do something about them.
Right.
Not like the non-cancer stem cells that the chemo is affecting. So wow, someone has 80% reduction in tumor, or now you're in remission, and that's
you got rid of the good cells, and the bad cells you just strengthened.
right. And the non-cancer stem cells are not necessarily good cells, Ty, but they're cells that have a finite lifespan, and they make the bulk of the tumor.
Okay.
You see, so then the tumor decreases because the chemo and radiation can affect the non-cancer stem cell. So the patient has a PET scan, MRI, CAT scan, bone scan, whatever it is, and they have a false impression by their physician that now they can't see the tumor. So you're in remission, but the cancer stem cells were never addressed with the chemo and never will with the chemo and radiation. So I'm going to your question.
No, this is
about
fantastic information.
Yeah, so The cancer stem cells are cells that survive in the bloodstream. They're like 5-star generals. They've been tested and in battle, and they're going to metastasize. See, non-cancer stem cells cannot metastasize. Okay. Only cancer stem cells can. So when we want to address the immune system in cancer, the problem is the immune system cannot recognize cancer stem cells. Why? Because they have a protein on the cell surface that shields them or cloaks them from the immune system. Okay. Dr. Robert Rowan, a good friend of ours, I think it was the January 2014 newsletter, Second Opinion, yeah. He wrote an article on cancer stem cells' ability to cloak or hide themselves from the immune system. So a cancer patient may have the best immune system according to white blood cells, T cells, lymphocytes, natural killer cells, but is that immune system recognizing and able to penetrate a cancer stem cell? That's the question.
And what you're saying is that the cancer stem cells have some kind of a cloaking to where the immune system can't see them.
Exactly. And that's well described in conventional scientific medical literature. This is not an alternative thought. This is duly scientifically proven.
According to Dr. Jimenez, the immune system cannot see the cancer stem cells, which he calls the 5-star generals that are directing the invasion. So what can we do to make these cells visible to our immune system?
There are substances that have been shown to attack cancer stem cells scientifically, like metformin, ellagic acid, green tea extract. But the list is very small because, first of all, it's very difficult to extract cancer stem cells from a human and keep them alive in the lab for them to be studied. There's only a few labs that do that, and this is a very, very expensive process, right? In the millions of dollars to study cancer stem cells.
All the more reason to eat fresh berries like raspberries and blackberries and strawberries, and to keep drinking your green tea, since they all contain high amounts of ellagic acid. And as Dr. Jimenez just mentioned, ellagic acid targets cancer stem cells, which are otherwise invisible to the immune system. Now let's listen to what A.J. Lanigan has to say about the amazing way that the T helper lymphocytes communicate with and regulate the other immune cells.
Again, the macrophages, the neutrophils, the natural killers. How do they regulate them? Through what we call cytokines. Chemical messengers. Think of them as chemical emails or faxes. And so that's very important, not just the cells, but also cellular communication. All of this working, by the way, Ty, we don't give one thought to it. There is more wisdom in one of these cells than there has been in all the libraries that have ever been, are now, or ever will be. I think that's pretty cool. Again, if you can imagine the immune cell as a guy or gal in the army, and they're dropped out there in Timbuktu, and the enemy's firing, and the enemy's advancing, and they're doing their job, fighting back and shooting and so forth. And all of a sudden, here comes the garbage truck and dumps all this rotten garbage in the foxhole with you. Well, are you going to fight and shoot, or are you going to tote garbage? So if you can kind of get that figure in your mind, then it kind of helps you to understand, this is why I don't need to consume so much sugar. This is why I don't need to consume or be around all these things that we've come to learn aren't good for you. It wasn't just, well, my mama told me so. It's because the burdens that we're putting on the immune system prevent it from digging in and fighting the fight and protecting you. If your immune system's got to make its living toting garbage, you're not going to live very long. You're going to be constantly besieged with disease and pestilence. And if that's the way you want to live, keep doing what you've been doing.
Wow, so are you sick? If you are, you probably need to look at what you've been doing and maybe change some habits. Didn't Einstein say that the definition of insanity was doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results? Let's listen to Dr. Veronique Desaulniers, Dr. V, as she explains the immune system, our first line of defense.
The immune system is powerful. It's the first line of defense that we have against bacteria, viruses, pathogens, and cancer cells. And what a lot of people don't realize is that the immune system is powerful. It has over hundreds of functions in the body, and there are billions of immune cells at your disposal every day. And when I think of our immune system, I think of a Star Wars galactic battle going on, because the immune system really does some incredible things. One of the immune cells will shoot out specific particles that will blast open a virus in a cancer cell. Other immune cells will secrete specific chemical poisons to cause those pathogens to die. Other immune cells will send out these long, sticky, gooey pods and engulf the pathogen in the cancer cell and recycle it and use its body parts. So the immune system is very powerful. And the important thing to know about your immune system is that 80% of your immune system is in the mucosal lining of your intestinal tract. So if you don't have a healthy intestinal tract, if you're feeding your body a lot of junk, the typical SAD foods, SAD foods, standard American diet food, your immune system is going to be compromised.
No doctor has ever healed anyone of anything in the history of the world. The human immune system heals. And that's the only thing that heals. True, doctors sometimes can alleviate symptoms enough so the body can go back and heal itself. Thus the doctor gets the credit for the healing. Okay, I'm all right with that. But we need to stop dealing with symptoms and start dealing with causation.
Bob Wright just said something very interesting. Doctors don't heal. The immune system heals. So let's go on down the road, Amarillo, Texas, talk to Dr. Roby Mitchell and get his perspective.
With a weakened immune system, then that allows cancer cells to grow better, right? So they do work together, right? And that's another reason why one of the protocols for many physicians that treat cancer is to bring down the fungal load, because if you bring down the fungal load, then the immune system gets stronger, right? And the one thing that does kill cancer or cure cancer is your immune system, right? Chemotherapy, radiation, these things, right? If you go to Cancer 101 book, right, it will tell you that they can't cure cancer. The cell kinetics are just against it. That will never happen. It's basically the same effect as when we give antibiotics, right? Antibiotics can't cure anything. They can bring down the number, right, the cell count, such that then your immune system can take over, but it's your immune system that does the curing. We have to understand that the thing that cures cancer is your immune system. If we stay with the bacterial overgrowth analogy, I might need to give a bit of an antibiotic, right, to get the number down, right, so that your immune system is just not overwhelmed, right? But then bring that number down, and then your immune system can take over. There may be a role for chemotherapy, radiation therapy in that sense. The overwhelming majority of physicians who treat cancer, though, with those therapies, depends solely on the radiation or the chemo. And the consequence of that is a weakened immune system. So the very system that you're depending on to cure cancer, right, we kill that off, right? And that's why so many people with cancer, they die of the treatment, right, rather than the cancer.
Everyone has cancer cells in their body. The only permanent cure to cancer is your immune system. And nutrition gives your immune system the firepower it needs to keep you well. So without nutrition, you're fighting with no weapons. Without your immune system, you're fighting with no army. Chemotherapy destroys your army. It destroys your immune system. Not only that, it causes secondary cancers in the body. It makes existing cancer stem cells more aggressive. And it causes a host of potentially lifelong damages to the body, from brain damage to hearing loss to neuropathy with loss of the use of your hands and feet, to kidney and bladder damage, bone damage, heart damage, lung damage. It's just total collateral damage from chemotherapy.
So a lot of times you can give chemotherapy, the tumor goes away, but you also destroy the immune system, then the cancer comes back with a vengeance. That's how you get rid of cancer, through your immune system, through systems that are already within you that have failed. So what we have to do is get them to work again. And that difference has made a tremendous difference in the results.
Radiation is bad for any healthy person. Why? Because it suppresses the immune system and causes DNA adducts to form so that cells mutate and then you end up getting cancer. So now somebody has cancer, what do? You put them into that very same thing that you know is going to cause cancer. Now radiation is supposed to kill the cancer, that's the philosophy, but then you're also going to cause more mutation to the healthy cells and cause a worsening of the effect. It's like pouring gasoline on a fire.
Where's the disconnect mentally that we have been brainwashed into believing that we can cure cancer with substances that cause cancer? I don't get that.
Yeah, no, exactly. We live in a culture that has allowed itself to be dominated by truly insane ideas.
Yeah.
For example, radiotherapy for cancer. Well, if radiation is so good at treating cancer, then we should turn Fukushima into a global cancer treatment center.
The cancer industry is really driven by greed and money because there is a cure. People are healing from cancer every day without the use of toxic drugs. There are literally thousands and thousands of published studies that prove the effectiveness of natural medicine. But you can't patent a plant and you can't patent an herb. Therefore, there's no money and no financial gain in teaching people about these things. And the sad thing is that millions of people are being sacrificed and they're dying horrific deaths and having horrific symptoms as a result of these treatments. And oftentimes they die as a result of the cancer treatment itself and not so much the cancer.
That's sad. That actually happened to my parents. Specifically my father. He was diagnosed with cancer. He was dead 25 days later and he died from the surgery. So I know that to be true from a personal perspective. Chemo destroys the immune system. Radiation destroys the immune system. It's like adding gasoline to the fire. Now, Dr. V just mentioned the fact that there is a cancer industry in her own words. I wanted to get more information about this cancer industry, so I headed back to Detroit to talk to Dr. David Brownstein. I've heard you mention the cancer medical complex. What do you mean when you talk about the cancer medical complex?
So I've written about this, and I say the cancer medical complex is this whole monolith that's been set up to make money on cancer. And so let's take the woman who is young woman who's been feeling a breast lump, goes to her doctor, she goes for a mammogram, they pick up something, she's going to go for a biopsy, they pick up something, now she's going to go for an excision, they tell her she's got cancer, she's going to get chemo and radiation. It's this whole system set up to treat cancer, and it's a multi-trillion-dollar industry right now. And the problem is people aren't living longer from these therapies. There's very few cancers that we've done well with. We've done well with some of the blood cancers, with some of the leukemias and lymphomas, and testicular cancer. The rest of them, the mortality rate has not changed much over the last 70 to 80 years. We have 1 in 7 women with breast cancer in the United States, 1 in 3 men with prostate cancer. We've got lung cancer and colon cancer, more than we know what to do with. And really, the conventional therapies for most types of cancer are pretty bad. If you look at the cancer statistics from 1930, which are being kept until the present day, our mortality rate is really unchanged for most of the hard tumors, which is breast, lung, prostate, colon. And it's really sad because we're spending these billions and trillions of dollars on therapies that aren't working. We really need to go back to work to figure out what's the underlying cause of these illnesses. And I can tell you the underlying cause of cancer, it's multifactorial. There's not one single cause for everybody, but I think that toxicity is part of the problem with it, poor nutrition is part of it, poor diet is part of it, dehydration is part of it, lack of iodine is a big part of it. And there's a whole bunch of things going on, and either we start to treat these underlying causes that are, I think, part of the underlying cause of the problem of cancer, or we're just going to continue going on with so many people suffering from it.
Dr. Brownstein mentioned getting to the root causes instead of just treating symptoms of disease. So let's look at hormones and the immune system and cancer. Is there a connection between the three?
If your hormones are not working, so your immune system can't work. For example, your thyroid is the battery to your body. So the thyroid, if it's not functioning, it cannot take care of you and not take care of, it drives the metabolism of every single cell in your body. Now, unfortunately, a lot more people are low thyroid today because of wheat. Wheat is very allergenic to the thyroid, and because of radiation from the most recent Japanese nuclear power plant. So a lot more people becoming low thyroid because of that. Then if you've got any kind of other hormonal imbalances, for example, when do guys get prostate cancer? They don't get prostate cancer when they're 25, when all their hormones are in great shape. They get prostate cancer after 50 because that's when the hormones start changing.
What is the difference between the hormones in females and males? And then I want to get to a question concerning the effect of estrogens on cancers.
There's no difference in the molecular aspect of the hormones that are in men and women. Women have testosterone, men have estrogens, both have progesterone and corticosteroids and all these. What's different is the amount. Right? So women have a higher amount of estrogens, men have a higher amount of testosterone, women have a higher amount of estrogen receptors, and men have a higher amount of testosterone receptors. Right? And that's key, that marriage between the receptor and the hormone, such that, you know, a woman, I can give a woman testosterone injections, she will never get as big as a man because she doesn't have the receptors that a man has. We can put estrogen into a man, you're not going to turn him into a woman, right, because he doesn't have the receptors for those estrogens, right? So, but we all have the same, we all produce the same exact molecules as far as estrogens and testosterone and DHEA and progesterone and these other hormones. It's important that we understand for these estrogens, the human ones anyway, that again, one of the pharmacologic characteristics of estrogens is that they make cells multiply, right? And this is very important in pregnancy, right? Because that fetus has to grow so much. And so during pregnancy, estrogen levels go way up and we get exponential growth of a fetus, right? Other cells, if they get exposed to higher levels of estrogen, right, then they can grow faster also. So in breast cancer, in prostate cancer, other cancers, if estrogen levels are elevated, right, or if we're exposed to a more potent estrogen, right, and so this is where we get into environmental estrogens, then that cancer can grow faster, right? And it's not necessarily that endogenous estrogens cause cancer, right? But they can certainly, like insulin, right? That's the other cancer-promoting hormone. They can make the fire burn hotter. Yeah.
Okay, great analogy. So it's like more gasoline on the fire when you have a higher level of estrogen than you should have.
Correct.
Which, you know, it's lots of articles today that we're reading about the effect of what they call xenoestrogens.
Correct.
Which are
so
fake estrogens in the environment.
Right, right.
So can you talk about that a little bit in relationship to cancer?
Right, and so that's one of the reasons, you know, why we see such a proliferation of cancer in the West, right, and haven't seen it in the West. We're seeing it more in third world countries now, but because of our exposure to environmental and pharmaceutical estrogens, right, that has the effect of throwing more gasoline on the fire. So some of the insecticides, pesticides, fungicides that we use, they have an estrogen effect, right? These are what we call xenoestrogens, xeno meaning foreign. So those again, long-term exposure. So we have to think about estrogen exposure in lifetime exposure as we do like with radiation exposure. So if you're a radiation technologist, right, you wear a little badge on you that gives us a Geiger counter amount of radiation that you are getting exposed to over a lifetime. And you get to hear, you know, we say, well, you can't be exposed to any more radiation. Same thing with these estrogens, right? So there is a lifetime exposure of estrogen that dictates your risk for different cancers, right? So you are producing estrogens as a human. As a man, you're producing estrogen. As a woman, they're producing estrogens. Women produce more. So if we go adding on top of that environmental estrogens, then that increases your lifetime exposure of estrogen. If you take birth control pills, that increases your lifetime exposure of estrogen. If you take synthetic hormone replacement after menopause, that increases your lifetime exposure of estrogen. If you stay overweight with these fat cells that are born of inflammation, these growth factors, right, that is increasing your lifetime exposure of estrogen.
So it's really a cumulative effect when we're talking about the exposure to estrogens.
Exactly.
As opposed to just a one-off.
Right.
So I'm hearing hormones, estrogen, testosterone, thyroid, immune system. So naturally, my thought goes to fat cells and cancer and obesity. Is there any kind of relationship between obesity and cancer? So let's listen to Dr. Roby Mitchell, Dr. James Forsyth, and Dr. Patrick Quillen address this issue.
Just talk about obesity for a second. 2/3 of Americans are overweight. Half of them, or 1/3 of them, are medically obese. You realize that obesity increases the risk for diabetes, hypertension, a couple of different types of cancers, colon and breast, gallstones, Alzheimer's, the list goes on. And yet, the more we focus on obesity, the more nutrition supplements that are available for it, it seems the fatter America gets. And a big part of that has been some of the misinformation that came out. In the 70s and 80s, they said, don't eat fat. You won't get fat if you don't eat fat. So they said, what can I eat? Well, anything but fat. So we loaded the food with sugar. Now we've got more obesity than ever.
I always tell patients, every cancer diet's a weight loss diet, because anytime you're cutting out simple sugars and high glycemic foods, you're going to lose weight. Simple as that.
And any anti-cancer diet is low in sugar because we don't want to fuel the cancer cells, right?
Cancer cells, Otto Warburg told us in 1932 that cancer cells only thrive on simple sugars, not complex carbohydrates, not fats or proteins. And he was right then, but conventional oncology has completely ignored that. In fact, if you go in any infusion center in any hospital in the country, you'll see big bowl of candy usually and soft drinks.
Yeah.
And so they totally ignore the properties of the cancer cell.
Dr. Roby, would you talk about the relationship between fat cells and cancers?
So fat cells, we have to delineate normal fat cells from fat cells that are fat cells because of the inflammatory process, right? So, normal fat cells per se are not necessarily carcinogenic. Inflammation is carcinogenic. And what inflammation is basically a war between your immune cells and some critter, right? It can be a virus, it can be a bacteria, it can be a fungus, it can be cancer, right? So if you remember back to the beginning of the Iraqi war and that shock and awe, so that's very analogous to what happens with the immune system when it's trying to fight off a bacteria, virus, or fungus to some degree. So your immune system, and it's a very apropos analogy to compare the immune system to the military, because you do have all these different soldiers, T cells and killer T cells and macrophages and macrocytes and so forth, Kupffer cells, in the liver, and specialized cells in each tissue in the body that are sentinels that are, surveying the area, and then if something goes awry, then they let loose, and they have all these weapons of mass destruction to make things happen. So when your temperature goes up, when you get red, when you have diarrhea, when you have the sniffles and the watery eyes and all that, so all of that is not because of the critter. That's because of these chemicals that your immune system is able to release. And these, I was an emergency room doctor before, and I can tell you that these chemicals are so powerful that they can kill you very quickly in a process that we call anaphylactic shock, right? So if you go into anaphylactic shock, and again, that's a consequence of the production of these weapons of mass destruction of the immune system, you die very quickly if you're not in my emergency room, right? So we have to respect that the immune system has some really powerful weapons, and so in a condition less benign than anaphylactic shock, where you got fever and redness and that type of thing, then it's just spitting out some chemicals that make the environment not so hospitable. Not so hospitable for the bacteria, but also not so hospitable for human cells either, right? And so this is what creates that toxic situation that over a long period of time, the human cell will try to protect itself from. One of the things, the chemicals that is produced during this inflammatory process are called growth factors. So growth factors have an estrogenic effect, and estrogens in general make cells go into what hyperplasia that we talked about before. So making one cell faster than normal, change to 2, change to 4, change to 8, again, exponential growth, right? So those fat cells that are born of an inflammatory situation, right, those then are linked to the formation of cancer.
So there is a direct relationship between fat cells and cancer. Wow, that's fascinating information. Now, Dr. Robert Scott Bell is a gastrointestinal health specialist. He understands the immune system, the way that it's generated in our gut. And so I thought it was very important to talk to him about this subject.
A recurring theme that I'm hearing from doctors that I've interviewed is cancer can't exist if the immune system is functioning properly.
Yeah.
So talk about that.
Well, the toxins impact the liver. The liver is your main organ for detoxification to bind and eliminate and excrete through the colon as solid waste or sending to the kidneys as a liquid waste. If the liver's not doing its job, of course, what gets to the kidneys is often a form that the kidneys can't handle very well, and then the toxins then circulate through the system. The body tries to find a way to tuck it away somewhere else. Now, a big way that we interact with these toxins is through the gastrointestinal tract, the alimentary canal. And these toxins are going to impact on the microflora. The microflora is the seat of the immune system, along with the liver, but in the intestines, or 70% or so of the immune system is there. And when we impact our healthy flora, the good gut ecology, we impact negatively our ability to have a normal interaction with the outside world. Because technically, that gastrointestinal tract, that alimentary canal, from your mouth, and we get astrological, I love to do this, out through the planet Uranus, you get it? You have this tube that's technically outside of your body, even though it's in. It's the outside environment carried through, and there's that barrier, that epithelial barrier that is that epithelial integrity is critical to protect you from things that shouldn't get in, including these toxic poisons or even metabolic waste. And when that barrier is corrupted via toxins, additives, preservatives, colorings, flavorings, pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, plastifiers, GMOs, genetically modified ingredients now, and heavy metals, especially like mercury, you pierce that barrier. You impact, you create inflammation, and now you have leaky gut. And the bacteria themselves are no longer in a hospitable environment, so you have dysbiotic organisms growing. You have candida, yeast albicans, overgrowth, and different forms of candida. And there's so many things that go wrong. It's amazing that we survive it all, but that's a testament to the Creator, that we've been created to withstand so much assault. But we have a limit. And that limit, of course, is when the toxins overwhelm our ability to deal with them, the accumulation can no longer be held in check. Then we have that dysregulation and these cells proliferate, and our immune system no longer has the strength and integrity to be that barrier, to fight it off, to keep it in check, because of all these other things that occur, the liver toxins, the intestinal toxins, etc. So this is where the immune system is corrupted, the gut primarily along with the liver, and that's why I always start my focal point of healing for anybody by working with the liver and the gut. And then we are not even necessarily chasing a symptom, chasing a disease, but we're correcting the terrain, the milieu, or the environment at its source.
In 1908, Eli Metchnikoff won a Nobel Prize in medicine for his work with the immune system. He's considered the father of modern immunology, and his work with the bacteria that makes yogurt. And he said, death begins in the colon. And for many patients, that's true. And so what do? We give them narcotics, which is going to, it causes a slowing down of nerve impulses. That's good. Shuts down the pain, slows down the nerve impulses that go to the muscles too, which now causes constipation. If the patient had a problem with dysbiosis or a lack of proper organisms in the gut, it's going to get worse now. So I guess modern medicine needs to look, instead of this being just a business, and it's okay to make money at healthcare as long as you're helping people, but instead of it just being a business, let's make it a business that looks at underlying causes. And instead of Mrs. Jones, the new diabetic, saying 20 years worth of annuities, look at this, she's worth $250,000. Let's see if we can get her out of diabetes. Let's see if we can change the underlying causes. Same thing with cancer.
Interesting perspective from Dr. Quillen. He says that we need to get to the underlying causes and not just treat symptoms when we're dealing with cancer. When I was recently in Washington, D.C., I was able to connect with Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, an expert on vaccines. Here's what she had to say. So health is an inside-out phenomenon.
That's my phrase.
Right?
That's what I say all the time.
That's where I got it.
Oh!
I read some of your lectures.
That's
so
good.
Health is an inside-out phenomenon,
Yes.
which I've heard you say. Could you explain what you mean by that? Is bad health a result of a lack of needles?
No. and the opposite side of that is health does not come through a needle. It just can't. We just can't in any way think that we're going to inject something into a little baby or an adult that in any way it's going to positively impact their health. So health is an inside-out phenomenon. You have an intact immune system, good nutrition, adequate organs of detoxification, liver, kidney, colon, skin, all of those things come out easily. You've got all the appropriate nutrients in there, your B vitamins, vitamin D, vitamin C, all the appropriate things that you need. That you could be swimming in bugs. In fact, sitting in this room right here, how many bugs do you think are in the air in this massive hotel and the carpeting? And if you live on a farm and you're going out and petting animals and all of that, you are not succumbing to all of these viruses and bacteria that are around you. If you are healthy from the inside out and your immune system does what was God intended it to do and what we were humanly designed to be.
Wow, fascinating quote by Dr. Tenpenny there. Health is an inside-out phenomenon. I'd have to agree with her. We've got to be healthy on the inside. Otherwise, health is not going to be expressed on the outside. So how do we stay healthy on the inside? That's the question. While we were filming this episode, actually, I'm good friends with all of the production team that's here with me here in the studio. And one of them asked me, he said, Ty, how many of your relatives that died of cancer do you think died from environmental toxicity? How many of them was caused by that, by environmental toxicity? I told him, I think probably all of them, all 7 close family members that I've lost were due to environmental toxicity. Now, this is in line with the American Cancer Society website. If you go there, there's a document called Cancer Facts and Figures that you can download, and in that document it says up to 95% of all cancers are caused by environmental toxins. So it seems pretty important to learn about toxicity to me, and in light of the fact that most people that die of cancer die because the cancer got a hold of their body because their body was toxic. So tomorrow night, we're going to learn about toxins. We are going to learn about these environmental toxins that invade your body, whether it be through vaccines or genetically modified foods or pesticides on your food, fluoride in the water, whatever the toxin source may be, that compromise that immune system that we learned about tonight and make your body more susceptible to cancer. This is incredibly valuable information. You don't want to miss tomorrow night's episode. It could literally save your life. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you have a great evening. We'll see you tomorrow. I am here with Stacy. I'm at CCS convention in Los Angeles, and Stacy's a cancer survivor. You had triple-negative breast cancer. How many years ago, Stacy?
Last year I was diagnosed.
Last year?
Last year.
So talk about the diagnosis and talk about what you used to treat that cancer since that time.
Okay. Last year in July, I was diagnosed with triple-negative breast cancer. I opted not to do any of the traditional big 3. I did not want to do the cut, poison, and burn traditional ceremonies. I opted to do all holistic. I did no surgery, no chemo, no radiation. I changed my diet probably 180 degrees and went all natural, raw juicing. Took supplements, enzymes, changed a lot of different modalities from sodium bicarbonate. I was looking into RSHO. I was looking into a variety of different modalities to use for natural cancer care. The reason I did that was probably because my father had prostate cancer, and I watched him go through a variety of fun trials and tribulations with that, and ultimately watched him die. So unfortunately for me, that wasn't an option. I knew in my heart that that was not the way to go, and toxic poisons were not something that I wanted to pump into my bloodstream. There wasn't probably anything that I didn't try in the beginning because it's your life. You know, you're looking to further your life, obviously. I'm only 46. I've got a 6-year-old daughter, and I'd kind of like her to see me, and I'd like to see her get married and all the above, and I know I will. Had I gone the other route, I don't think that I can say that, comfortably anyway. I tried just changing modalities from your mindset, doing binaural beats, listening to different modalities on bright frequencies. I did a variety of supplements. I did a variety of vitamins, nothing non-toxic, nothing that would harm me or anything else. And just, you know, really made the switch 100%, made that commitment to say, I want to live. And I realized that, you know, most people think it's a death sentence. And I prefer to call it a life sentence. I am choosing to live, and this is what I want to do. It's been a year now. After 8 months, they tested me. I had a variety of things that had gone on prior to. They still were going to schedule me for surgery. They still wanted to do a lumpectomy. I had a biopsy to confirm so that we know it was, in fact, cancer. It wasn't just some made-up thing. And
what stage was it?
Stage 2.
Stage 2.
It was stage 2. They said it was aggressive. Well, I didn't know that at first. At first, the surgeon just said, no problem, we can do a generic lumpectomy, and then you can, go from there and have radiation and chemo. And I thought, no. Went and got a second opinion, and the second opinion said, no, it's triple negative. It's way worse. You're going to have to do chemo first, and then you're going to have to do surgery, radiation, and chemo again. And I said, no, I'm not starting with the worst. That's not an option. So.
Did they give you a hard time at first?
Oh my goodness, yes. They sent me registered letters. They called repetitively on cell phone, home phone, business phones to try to get me back in. Interestingly enough, about 3 months ago, I saw the surgeon at a soccer game for my daughter, and he kind of looked me up and down like, you shouldn't be here, right now. And I was very proud to say that I didn't go back to him. I went back to him once to check and say, can you still do it? They're saying it's worse. He says, yeah, I can do it. Let's book the surgery. They booked it. I never put it in my phone. I knew I wasn't going to go. And Universe provides, and I had a wisdom tooth infection so that I couldn't have surgery. And then I also had another death in the family, and it was another cancer. And this time was not expected. Nobody knew about it, and he died within a week. And so it was very quick. And people were very scared. My family and friends were very mortified that I was going to be the next casualty. But most of them hung through. Most of them said, no, you're going to be fine. You know what you're doing, and just keep on keeping on. And that's what I've been doing the whole time, and with great success. I've been very, very fortunate, and I'm super grateful that I followed my own intuition.
That's awesome. Okay, so Stacy, you said that at the soccer game, the doctor or your surgeon saw you and kind of looked and said, you could see in his mind you shouldn't be here. Did he come ask you what you did?
Didn't say a word, and I didn't want to offer him information as of yet. I want to wait a little bit longer, just so I can go back in his office and say hi, and know that I made the right decision. And when I asked him point blank, what are the odds? I hear that cancer, if you do radiation and chemotherapy, that I can get further cancer. And he says, well, yeah, that's true, but... And I said, well, unfortunately, I already have a predestination in my body for cancer. I'm not going to do it knowing that that's the number one side effect of both of those is more cancer. Why would I do that? That doesn't make any sense. So he knew I wasn't really on board. I don't think he was shocked that I never came back, but they did try really hard to get me to come back. And I opted out of everything, and I even had Medi-Cal for women over 40 that was free, and I opted to not use any of the treatments, even if it was free. I'd rather pay for it out of pocket and do it myself. Well, because she's so young, I decided that, I hate to say less is more, but she's very smart, and all children are very intuitive, and they pick up what's going on anyway. They know when things are going on and there's tenseness and stress and whatnot, no matter what's going on. We were right in the middle of a stress, as usual, life happens. We were selling our house, and we're trying to sell the house and go through a bunch of changes there with business and whatnot. We got knocked off on our business. We had a lot of things going on. So she was under the impression that it was probably just that in the beginning. And then we just kind of talked about it, and she knew that we were making changes. She saw mommy buy a juicer. She saw mommy stop eating sugar. She stopped mommy, doing all of these things that she knows that she doesn't do. We don't eat dinners the same. Mommy's cooking differently. Why are you eating that? Why are you not eating that? So we had a lot of questions. So I finally sat down, and she knew I was going to doctors, and I said, one of the doctors wants me to have surgery and have the tumor removed. And she stopped and she started jumping. We bought a rebounder. I bought a huge trampoline for the outside and the inside so I can keep up my lymphatic system. And she was jumping upside down, and she stopped and she said, Mommy, I want to tell you something. And I said, okay. And she says, I don't believe the doctors. I believe in what you're doing. And I thought, wow, out of the mouth of the babes, it was amazing for her to be so smart about it and so calm. And then she started jumping again. It was like no big deal to her. It was just a passing phase of, there's your decision, run with it. And she has been great. She supports me. She knows. She always, even if she's pretend making tea or cakes or something, she says, Mommy, it's sugar-free. You can have it. So she's been really, really wonderful throughout the whole thing. And I'm very blessed that she is so, so good. Everybody around started to come on board. They're like, wow, you look good. You look healthy. You're not bald. You're not throwing up. You're not, wow, it's amazing. And then I get test results back that back that up and say, you've got an AMAS test, you've got a 125, you've got a 15-3, everything for breast cancer, and they're all normal. No evidence of disease. This is insane, And what did you do? I ate better. You know, I mean, literally, that's not rocket science. It shouldn't be. But I've created a website, or a web blog actually, on Facebook right now. There is a blog running, but I'm just not ready to get it up and running. Maybe after this weekend I will. But it's called Operation Blueberry Melt, and it's basically to share and empower other people to make conscious decisions. One of my little tags that I like to say is, you know, health is a choice, choose wisely. And that means that it's your decision. It's up to you to make your own life choices, your own path. What I did may not work for everybody, absolutely. Every single person is different, but you got to find your own way. But it doesn't have to be toxic, and that was my point. I really look forward to the day that I can sit down with my daughter, maybe on her 21st birthday or maybe on her 60th birthday, I don't know. But there'll be a special time and we'll know. In her mindset now that when she does get older, she will see the power of being an independent thinker and to research everything and to make sure that, you know, she knows that she's loved and that her words meant so much to her mom that, you know, it's intangible. I mean, it's priceless. It really is. That I'm able to share that with my daughter so young, and that she will carry that on to her generation. I can't even tell you. I'm grateful every single day for every breath that I take, for every person that I meet, and everybody that I can share with, because it's just another level in my journey, in my growth, in my spiritual growth, in my personal growth, and you know, there's always going to be something else. There will be another stress. Life happens. But with people and programs like this, you can really learn to have an affinity for like-minded souls and people that are coming together across the planet that really want this information, and it's very obvious that they want this kind of information. Thank you.
So this information is so valuable. I mean, it literally could save your life or the life of someone that you love. And there's no doubt about that. And so I want you to have this information. I really want you to choose to own this today, because this information is going to be available for about 24 hours and then it's gone and the next episode is going to air. So, you know, by choosing to own this today, what you do is you not only support us and our mission to eradicate cancer once and for all, but you're going to provide your friends, your family, your loved one, someone that you care about with knowledge, with information that's going to be valuable to save their life potentially, or one of their friends' lives. If you choose to own this today, you're not only going to receive your DVD set, but you're also going to receive a free digital copy that you can share with a friend or a family, someone that you love. And you're really going to be getting information from some of the smartest people on the planet. Some of these medical doctors that we've interviewed are just incredible. And the knowledge that they've shared with us is literally life-saving. So I urge you to own one of these copies today.